mayonnaise. I'm sure that's the biggest word I know.
Hello, everybody, and welcome on into College Football Player Props for week 2 of the college football season, which, of course, is the 3rd week of college football, which makes all the sense in the world. I'm Thomas Viola, and joining me, as always, here from Unabated, it is the realist, Chris Kay. Chris, it is great to be back in. We are here for another week of college football action. We had some good work last week. Things went pretty well. How did you feel after week 1?
Pretty good. That immediately got kicked into week 2, so not so good. Just getting the nuts and bolts of figuring these teams out. But it was good. We had a good string of luck with the BC game, the USC game that we discussed on the kind of the fall kickoff show that we did on Sunday. So I'm hoping to run it back a little bit here and talk a little bit of context of why some of these teams are a little bit fickle, and to look for tonight and tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of feedback from you there, but we should be good now. All right, let's get into it. You're right. We had a pretty good week 1. Now, what's the adjustment like? Because week 0, not technically, a full week of college football action. So week 1 was really our first look at a lot of these big teams. How are you adjusting from week 1 to week 2 here? What is there anything that you're significantly changing? Do you feel like a lot of your priors were mainly confirmed? What are you feeling?
A lot of it's just based off of snaps and routes run and things like that, because we had a lot of blowouts, and It's hard to say, okay, well, then we're looking at the actual play-by-play or replaying the game a little bit to see, hey, when did Jonte Cook play versus DeAndre Moore, Texas receivers and things like that, because, one game sample size is tiny, and you can't change all of your different usage rates based off of that, especially with so many blowouts. Even the games that had tight contests, interconference battles, those ones, even we can't take that and say, all right, well, that's what we're going to go with in week 2. So a lot of different snap counts, routes run type data looked at. And then, any of the games that, we specifically watched, Ben and Glenn and myself, we try to then kind of target those for ourselves, because that always helps, right? You actually see the game compared to just looking at some of the PFF data. So a lot of tinkering with some of the things, trying not to overreact, and take it from there.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we have to do. We have to keep a bit of a level head, keep ourselves up. And, the other thing is, it is going to be a little more difficult through these first couple of weeks here, because like you mentioned, there's a lot of blowouts. There's a lot of really good teams playing really terrible teams. Does that make it harder to predict usage because you're not quite sure about the game script, about if players are going to get pulled at some point? Do you think that gets easier once we get into conference play, or is it just that it's a little bit different of a process here in the first few weeks?
It's just going to be very volatile, and you should kind of handle your bankroll accordingly, because you look at the Bama game, they only threw 6 attempts by halftime. The game was over. Any shot of some of these different overs that you had were never going to come to fruition. So you just have to be kind of wise. You have to expect some potential craziness with usage being so far off. I think it's just more of a being wise about how you look at the different props. If you're playing on underdog and building different slips, then you probably want to vary those options a lot more than you will in week 6 or 7. Once we hit October, November, it's a little bit. We certainly don't go on cruise control, but you can look at the previous 6-7 games data and get some good inferences. And by then, a lot of us have watched at least one team, every team at least once, essentially, and you get a good feel for offensive styles and matchups and things like that. So it'll get much easier in October. But yeah, we're excited for what's coming up this weekend, and hoping that we're staying on looking at the right stuff going into the games.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into some of those games in just a second here. But first, I want to remind everybody, the Unabated early bird sale has gone into overtime here. You're going to get all 18 weeks of the NFL season for just $649. That is for Unabated premium here. So you are getting the premium package pretty much 4 months here. It's going to take you all the way up to December for just $649. That's $200 a month. You're saving a great deal on that. $200 a month normally. You're getting it all for $650 for 4 months instead. And this is the last chance here. We are going to be ending things. We had enough demand. There were so many people coming in on the final day there for Thursday Night Football last night. We decided, you know what, we're going to extend it through the weekend here, but this is your last chance to get this deal here. So go to unabated.com/pricing. Check it out. If you use the promo code FALLBALL, FALLBALL, you're going to get a free trial of Unabated as well. However, use that free trial, you're kind of missing out on the end of the special here, but you can sign up at Calendly.com/unabated here. I'll throw that banner up so that you have the link. Calendly.com/unabated. Gonna give you a link so you can book a one-on-one demo where you'll most likely be sitting down with me and going through on a Zoom call. We'll talk through the entire tools. I'll walk you through how to use all of the fantastic products that we have here at Unabated, so that you can start betting better and boosting that bankroll here. But for now, I think that we should start boosting our bankroll. Chris, it is time to start talking about props. Where do you want to go first?
Let's look at Northwestern and Duke. They played tonight. If you're unaware, Northwestern's doing renovations on their real stadium. So they kind of concocted this like
a way cooler stadium.
Yeah, honestly, they should just keep it. It's incredible. It's like literally right on the lake. Which I do think will impact how the game plays a little bit, that lake effect of the wind and what the game may look like. If you are aware, Miami, Ohio played Northwestern last week, and the game was 13-6. So low scoring. I suspect another low scoring affair tonight between Duke and Northwestern. But I think there's some interesting plays here, some options to be had.
All right. So where are we going first on those options? Which market are you trying to look at here?
Well, if you're sharing your screen, I'm not seeing it. Apologies.
Apologies. So behind the scenes here, the plan was you were going to tell me what market, so I would have it up when I shared the screen.
Well, you pick. You surprise me. How about that? Let's look at Northwestern. They'll both pop up here, and let's look at rushing yards.
All right, we're going to be looking at rushing yards here for Northwestern, and let's take a look at what we've got. They didn't quite import all the way. So who are you looking at, and what are we projecting at? We
can talk. Let's see here: Cam Porter and Caleb Komolafe. So, Cam Porter, we have at 14.3 attempts for 55.3 yards, and then Komolafe, we have 5.8 and 25.1. So this one,
running back 1 and 2 here is, you said 25.1.
Yep.
All right. So we are seeing some edges coming up here right away for us. I'm going to zoom in a tiny bit so that everybody can see. And by the way, feel free to throw your questions into the chat as well, guys. This show is nothing without you guys. So feel free to come in and talk about what you want to talk about here. But Chris, talk to me about this Northwestern running back situation.
Yeah. So Porter's definitely the RB1. But they're going to run a slower game. It'll be, I think the clock will be moving fairly fast. I don't think we see a ton of usage with Porter in like the 20 plus carry range, hence the 14.3. Mm-hmm. So I'm intrigued by this under. He's like a 4th or 5th year guy. Years ago, he was a nice freshman that tore his ACL the next year and has kind of been downhill since. So I do think he'll get some decent usage, but I don't think this Northwestern team is going to move the ball enough to be to really be threatened by the 60.5 that we're seeing here. And then Komolafe is their backup. The line is tiny, 16.5. And this is an interesting one. We suspect he'll get 5-6 carries. That's a hard number not to hit. Mm-hmm. He got some snaps early in the game last week. He played 18 total snaps. So he's like a legitimate backup option for them that they're going to rotate in. This one's going to be way more volatile, but I do like it in theory. And then it kind of does correlate well with the under on Porter. Maybe we see a little bit more usage with Komolafe. I think the one worry that you would have with Porter is that if you're going to go under, you just worry that they run the ball 40 times. And that would hurt the amount of rushes that we've projected him at. So I do like both of those in those opposite ways, but it's an interesting one to I always find it funny, the different options that these sites put out for Big Ten. They always put out the most random backups, and I have found that those can be very successful.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of those angles that we're going to be hitting all year long when it comes to one of the big things that you want to look at, especially in college football props, is going to be usage. And identifying the spots where the line is indicating a usage level that we just don't project them for, whether that is over, like the case of Komalafe here, where we're saying, hey, he's probably going to get more usage than it looks like this line is projecting, or if it's some other guys like a fourth, fifth string wide receiver that's not going to get the usage. Like last week, we talked so much about tight ends and third string tight ends that had very small lines, but the reality is just weren't going to be in line to catch many, if any, passes. And so we were able to hit on some great unders there. And pretty much we're playing the same exact thing here the other way, right?
Yeah, pretty much. He's going to get Komalafe is going to get usage. The game script is going to point towards some good rushing usage just overall for Northwestern. This is not a Mike Wright. If you've ever seen him play, he used to be at Vanderbilt. He transferred to Mississippi State, somehow was accepted into Northwestern, and he's a non-thrower. His line, I think, is something like 165. It's a low number, and this game just really pushes towards a run-heavy, lower-scoring affair. So that's why both of those are in play.
Very interesting here as things are happening on screen. The market is immediately starting to move against us here. It was at 60.5 at Caesars a minute ago on Cam Porter. It's now down to 57.5. So maybe someone who is watching this just hit that, but I honestly think that could genuinely be what just happened here. But we're starting to see some market movement already.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I saw that too. It's wishful thinking. You know, I would love for people to be listening to us and taking the advice, but who knows? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But there's some interesting plays overall on the night slate tonight. So hopefully you guys are active and able.
Look, Chris, the reality is no one can prove that it wasn't us. So I'm going to stick with my story there, and we're going to move on. Are we still looking at the Duke game here? Do you have more angles in that, or do you want to move on to the next game?
Let's look at the passing yards real quick. Let's see if we get a here. So Mike Wright, we have you need attempts and yards, don't you?
Completions and yards.
Completion yards. So 185 yards and let's see, scale to catch 15.8 completions. I don't know if there's even any lines up, but let's see if anything.
Yeah, it does not appear that there. It does not appear that there is much, if anything.
So let's pivot to Duke's passing prop here. Malik Murphy, you might remember him because he was the backup at Texas. And he came in when Quinn Ewers got hurt. His number is 100. We have him at 169.7 yards. And completions is going to be 14.9.
All right. And we sim that out. And we're ending up with a good play here. We're ending up with 197.5 and plus 104 at Caesars right now.
Click and see how the market's moved on this one. This one opened up mid 200s, like 205.
We've got like 203, 204. It got up to 204, even up to 206 earlier this morning before being bet back down here.
Yeah, this is one of those ones I think, we have not made any numbers pivoted based on the lake effect, the potential for it to be a really slow, gross game. That's just Vegas doing its part on this. So I do really like the under here. He does have some good receiving options. He did throw it 40 times last week, but that was a very weird game against Elon where they didn't put him away and they had to really play the full game. That's just not really Duke's offense. I think they're going to want to try to run the ball a little bit more. And like I said, with this being a slower, grosser game, I think this under is a strong play for sure. And the market's moved that way as well. Yeah.
By the way, we have some YouTube comments coming in here. I mean, Captain Jack saying, hey, pretty sure it was us. Ricky Slade saying it was me at Caesars. And CJ for days, 60.5 minus 120 on the under at Fliff still for the running back play that we were talking about just now. And that's the great thing about Fliff. You're going to have terrible lines, but they're slow to update them, so they can be very stale, and you can hit some of them then.
Yeah, this Murphy one, I would be surprised if it stays at this going up into the game.
Yeah.
This just really tracks towards a run-heavy game on both sides. I mean, if Miami, Ohio, Northwestern is going to be 13-6, not that Miami, Ohio is anything special, but I don't see it being under 20 points, but I could see that same type of theme happening.
Yeah, I think that we could be very much in line for that. And as you see, it's already starting to move here. As Caesars has now gone to 197, so they're disagreeing with us on this one. So we're going to say that's definitely not us here. But where do you
hit the wrong button? They hit the
Yeah.
wrong button. That's what happened.
Very clearly. Now, where do you want to head next? Are we again sticking with this game and going into the passing market? Feels like we're more focused on the rushing area and the passing unders here.
Yeah, I think just generally speaking, passing unders makes sense. Let's look at this. I think the SMU BYU game has a lot to offer, and this is if SMU played on tomorrow, we wouldn't release them because there is a lot of indecision. This is one of those ones where it's like, hey, here's the situation, and you kind of tail on your own based off your own research and information, because I mentioned in our Discord CFB Alpha that the coach wants to play both quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen it last week because the blowout, but also he played early, this backup quarterback. So I think the under on Preston Stone could be intriguing, but the problem here is that this number was like 220, 230-ish for a while. And so now you're reverse buying the dip, right? You're buying it at its height. So
yeah, we're starting to get to that point where we're in the we're in that category basically of, okay, you might have missed the best on the number here, but I still like the angle, especially if it's something that the books are maybe not quite accounting for here, of saying, hey, wait a second, this guy might not play this whole game because they're doing quarterback by committee over here.
Yeah, and if you've watched, we had a really bad beat on week 0 with Preston Stone. His last attempt to make the comeback was like a 40-yard touchdown pass, and it hit the over of, I think we had it around 232 or 242, something like that. So he's really kind of live around this 200 to 225 number.
Mm-hmm.
The question becomes Kevin Jennings and how much that's the backup, how much he's going to play. We've seen him be used early. We've seen Kevin Jennings be really effective. So I think there's a strong possibility that we haven't projected enough of a split, but it's so hard to say with coach speak in quotes that we would never release it, but worth bringing up here in the context of this situation for sure.
Yeah, it's something that's worth checking out, but not necessarily something that's quite as data driven as if I go back to it here. Like, you do see we've got an edge that some would say is high enough that you want to go and bet it here. But this is very much something that we're also taking into account things that might just not be factored into the line that we're working on.
Right. I think the rushing part of this BYU offense is intriguing. And I was looking at this earlier. I'm surprised by this LJ Martin line.
Mm-hmm.
So LJ Martin had a really solid freshman year for BYU last year, came into this season as the presumed starter, but he's been banged up with a shoulder injury. He has played this season, but this Hinckley Ropati was the guy that started last week or was named starter. So they're going to split carries, but this 35.5 number is like shockingly low. Not that, LJ Martin's some superstar, that his usage is going to be so high, but that number is it's a lot lower than I thought it would be. And I think, if you look at some of these other places, right, it's in the low 40s on some of these sites. So that's one of the cool things about this is this prop board easily shows you where is the best place to bet this. You don't have to manually go through the different sites. So I like the over on Martin, and I do think the Ropati under is intriguing as well. We have it somewhat close in terms of usage, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if Martin was the clear RB1 and Ropati was the backup. This is one of those ones we kind of mentioned earlier, right? Week 1, you don't really know how much to put stock in that usage rates and stuff like that. We have to trust ourselves, but also look at the numbers and see what was done, especially with running backs. And they split it a decent bit. I think that with Martin getting healthier, he'll get a higher usage and a higher share of touches. So that's why I think the over on Martin's solid, and same with the under on Ropati.
Awesome. Now, in the chat here, Dabba Betts and Washmobile bring up an interesting point, because Dabba Betts is saying, in general, it would be better to practice to take, say, an under 55 at minus 125 or an under 53 at minus 108. Washmobile says there should be a line comparison calculator. And Jack is already coming into the chat to say that, hey, you can actually do that here. And so we'll show that off real quick using the prop simulator here. Now, the thing is, you do, of course, need a projection here. So maybe let's go back, talk to me, give me Murphy's numbers again, because I believe he was the one that was close in that 55. Like, of the people that we were talking about here, I feel like he's closest to the exact question that we're asking.
You're talking Cam Porter, the Northwestern guy, right?
Cam Porter.
Okay. So Cam Porter, we have him 55.3 yards and 14.3 rushes.
So basically what you do is you take this, you input your projection numbers in, and then it's going to immediately spit out the proper pricing at all of these lines. So of course, we've got the under 55.5 here at -140. So what it's telling you there is, hey, that -125 actually probably a good bet, since that's what the -135 price should be. But then, of course, it's also telling you, well, 53.5 should be -125. So if you're getting -108 on that, that is still a very good line. But this is telling you exactly what those fair prices here should be for each of these props. And so from there, you can just start comparing based on, like, how far off those numbers are from what they should actually be there, and start calculating your edge that way. So just wanted to show off that we do have that tool there for you before we head on to our next game here. So what are we going to next, Chris? Are we sticking with this BYU SMU game, or are we moving on?
Let's stay here real quick. Let's go to the receiving yards. This is BYU is always a fickle one. Their usage and everything is just the craziest, and they're not consistent with it. So this is a tough one to release week over week. Luckily, it is a Friday game, so we're not going to be worrying about it. But Darius Lassiter is the presumed top receiver for BYU. He was suspended or was handling eligibility requirements, and he missed week 1. So the usage for this passing attack is going to be really tough to gauge. If you think he slots into the receiver 1 role, you probably like the over. If you think he's just going to be one of many, which BYU can very often be, is one of many options out wide, then you might be intrigued by this under. So just contextually, if you're looking at this BYU game and you're wondering where this Darius Lassiter guy came from, just was essentially suspended and unable to play week 1. And so the usage will be, I'll be watching strictly tonight just to see kind of what we see out of Lassiter and how he plays. Chase Roberts and Cody Epps are the other 2 guys that are in play as the top options. And then they have a tight end that is used fairly heavily, Keanu Hill. So there's a lot of different targets in the passing attack. And I think the number is somewhere around 195 for the quarterback, Retzlaff. So it's, that's not a big pie. So I think that was interesting to look at.
Very interesting. Nathaniel Pucci says Bet Online is now up to 40.5. Yeah, their number will be a little bit slow to update. Sometimes you can see that little yellow dot up there. The green ones are in real time here. But so what do you think? Is Darius Lassiter going to slot into a wide receiver 1 role, or are you liking this edge that we're showing on the under here?
I think I would like the under, but this is not one that I would feel super confident in, right? I think I like the previous mentioned ones. Definitely I'm more confident in. This one would be one of those situations where you want some juice on the game. You have a lean. I think the lean is under on Lassiter, but it's definitely got some risk to it.
All right. Now, where are we headed next, my friend?
Let's look at Iowa State.
All right. What do we want to look at?
We want to look at rushing yards specifically, please.
All right. Moving on to rushing yards here for Iowa State. Where are we going?
So Abu Sama, this is a really tough situation. They play tomorrow, Saturday, and Abu Sama came into the season as the guy that everybody thought would be the running back 1. He had this insane. You might remember it, even Tom. He had the insane performance in the snow last year. It's like 5 touchdowns and 300+ rushing yards. So he has big time upside. We have him projected for 9.6 attempts and 43 yards. The reason why this one's tough is because he split the carries with 2 other guys pretty evenly. Hard to say why. Last week they played North Dakota, FCS team, but a decent FCS team at the very least. But the ball was like kept away from them. They didn't have the game was 21-3 was the final score, but it was never really in jeopardy. But it was So it's tough to gauge. If you have a vibe on Abu Sama, like if you have a lean, if you're someone that likes Iowa State, watches them, and you think that he's going to be the main guy, that 40.5 number is like criminal. But it's hard to gauge that, right? Week 2, we're not going to make that assumption and put that out to the unabated subscribers. One thing to note is that he got dinged up at the end of last week's game. We think he's fine. We haven't seen it. Our news team hasn't seen anything that makes us think he'll miss the game, but that'll be something you want to keep an eye on as this game comes.
All right. Anything on Kamari Moulton here? Or do you want to move into the passing game?
Let's not worry about Iowa. They're about as crazy as it gets.
They put up 40 points last week, man. I was the air raid offense now.
Kamari Moulton ran, I think, 19 carries in the first half and then had none in the second half. Caleb Johnson, I believe, was suspended for a half or was being disciplined, so he didn't play the first half. So there's no real way to know or reason to know, hey, like this is going to be a true split, or hey, this is Caleb Johnson's role or heavy usage is going to be his. I would just avoid it. Iowa, we like to focus on tight ends for Iowa. That's where you make your money with, but we haven't released or completed those because we're hoping to see some information on why exactly we saw what we saw. If you go to the receiving yards would be good for Iowa State.
All right.
They have 2 top options that they use fairly heavily, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins. So for Higgins, we have 50.3 yards and 3.6 catches. And then for Noel, we have 48 yards and 4.5 receptions. So these guys should, in theory, see the grunts of the work, right? The most usage.
Mm-hmm.
But this Iowa defense is about as good as it gets. It's always stifling. It's always tough to throw on. Rocco Becht is a quality quarterback, but he's not, game-breaking NFL caliber quite yet. He's a younger guy that's gotten some good experience. But so we can put these back in here again. That's 3.6 receptions for Higgins, 50.3 yards. And then 4.5 receptions for Noel and 48 yards.
There we go. Now they're working for us.
So Higgins is going to be your bigger play guy. He's your kind of a deeper threat, probably average 18 yards a catch type guy. Whereas Noel plays out of the slot and sees more volume, hence the more receptions projected to him. But in this matchup, I think the unders on either of them are both good options. Iowa's defense is just so good. If Iowa can move the football, which they could not do at all last year, then teams are not going to be on the field as much, and it makes those unders more intriguing this year compared to last year.
Yeah,
because they'll have obviously, right? Iowa State will have the ball less. So both of these are in play and worth considering. There's not really any concern about usage data and all that type of stuff when it comes to Higgins and Noel. It's really strictly Abu Sama that prevents us from releasing this to the subscribers. So these are 2 that I think are worth getting some action on if you want to watch. It's called the Cyhawk Trophy. Tom, you ever heard of the Cyhawk Trophy?
Oh, of course I've heard of the Cyhawk Trophy. Ironically, I was thinking about that apropos of nothing because I am just a man, and these are the things that men think about at random times on a Thursday afternoon.
Exactly.
Which was the Cyhawk Trophy. I am ready for this battle this weekend.
This is one of the rare rivalries that happens early in the season. Most of them, are around Thanksgiving, but this is always one of the ones that's always early in the season. So it's kind of a fun and fierce rivalry. So this is a way to get some action on it if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great one to look at. Now, are we going to stick with this game anymore? Do you have anything else?
Let's go to my team. Let's see what's up for Virginia Tech. We can stay here on the receiving yards as well.
Dr. Evil says we think about the Cyhawk Trophy and the Roman Empire exclusively. That is absolutely correct here. Every so often, the Illabuck Trophy sneaks in for me. Not going to lie. Every so often, that one wanders into the crevices of my mind.
Illabuck, is that Illinois and Ohio State? Wow. We need less trophy. Well,
I disagree. We need more trophies. We need less turnover props.
Yeah, the Big Ten is the one that has all the great rivalries, the Paul Bunyan Trophy and all that type of stuff. So yeah, I'll agree with that.
We need less turnover props. I think the turnover belt was fine. The UNLV turnover slot machine is okay, and the turnover chainsaw was cool. But like at some point, it's gotten ridiculous and out of hand here.
A little bit out of hand for sure. So,
Mhm.
All right, Virginia Tech goes up against Marshall, almost 3 touchdown favorite. Let's look at Felton and Jennings. So Felton, we have at 3.3 receptions and 53.8 yards, and then 46.3 yards for Jennings and 3.4 receptions. So we have their usage pretty tight. This is going to be an offense that will throw the ball a decent bit. Kyron Drones is a little bit banged up. That's really the biggest reason why we're not doing any sort of projections for Virginia Tech, with the fact that that there is a concern that, hey, if Drones isn't playing, what's going to happen? Felton got good usage last week, but everything was super short around the goal line. The line of scrimmage. Jennings had a little bit less usage, but had the big long touchdown to put them ahead at one point last week against Vanderbilt. So the usage points towards a Felton over. I think that's the way I'd like to look at it. If you're looking at this game and you want some action, I think the Felton over looks good. He's kind of like a Jaden Higgins, where he is definitely a big play guy. He had multiple long touchdowns last year for the Hokies with Drones as quarterback, so there's a connection there. And I think a lot of people argue last week like Felton would be the receiver one, not Jennings. I lean Jennings, but it's debatable for sure. So I think the Felton is more intriguing than the under on Jennings. This usage really points towards more rushing and more success on the ground against Marshall, which it wouldn't be surprising, but I think Felton over is a strong number at that 41.5.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, again, this is one of those plays where we talk about where we're looking at usage and we're looking at where the lines are versus where we think that the actual usage rates are going to fall. And so it's one of those cases where maybe we're not seeing quite the largest edge on the board here in the prop simulator, but we are seeing a nice little edge when it comes to playing some of these angles, just like Derek Carty and I would talk about during baseball season here about hitter strikeout props, where we're playing a bunch of guys who are likely to be pinch hit for. And by the way, if you want more Derek Carty, stay tuned, because right after this show, Derek Carty and I are going to be right on this channel talking NFL week 1 props here. So we're going to be going from college to the NFL. But right now, Chris, I've got a question for you. Now, I actually have 2 questions for you from the chat here. One is more of a side question, so feel free to decline it. But Jack Green wants to know, any chance New Mexico State can upset Liberty tomorrow? Late game on ESPN2.
I don't think so. New Mexico State's entire team essentially went to Vanderbilt, and so they got a bunch of newer players. Gavin Sawchuk, I think, is not Gavin Sawchuk. Seth McGowan, a former Oklahoma running back, is there. But otherwise, I would probably lean on no upset in that one. Liberty is a strong team with Kaidon Salter at quarterback.
Now, Fox Mulder wants to believe in Wright over on rushing yards here. He's talking about the quarterback. I'm going to guess it's in this game or the last game here.
Mike Wright, Northwestern. Yeah. Let me look and see what we have for him.
Now, worth pointing out, we might have projections for him, but we can't actually simulate his rushes because quarterback rush math does not work the same way as running back rush math.
Especially in college where sacks come into play. It's really a tough science because a sack counts as negative yards and a rushing attempt. We have him at around 36.8 yards. So I don't know if you mentioned the actual number there, but he should see about 10 carries. I don't hate it. It's the best part of this game is his legs. So it wouldn't surprise me. I don't hate it. I don't know what the line is though, of course. So
yeah, it doesn't appear that there's any line out right now, at least nothing that we're picking up, which doesn't surprise me. This feels like one that's going to open up the morning of, if anything. CJ Fordays says, perfect way to spend the last 2 hours of work on a Friday. Gosh darn right it is. That is exactly what we're here for. So we are happy to have you guys along for the ride. As Rando This is back on the Iowa State receiving core here. Any thoughts on the Benjamin Brahmer under 28.5-yard prop, only 2 targets in week 1? Fox says 34.5 is the line on Fliff on the Mike Wright there. So probably right in line with where we're going on Mike Wright. But going into the Iowa State receiving core here, Benjamin Brahmer, what are you thinking?
Yeah, Brahmer's a really good tight end for them. Iowa State tight ends have had success, but it's really interesting because it was just Charlie Kohler, who's I think he's 3rd string on the Ravens now. So it's hard to say exactly what this offense likes to do because Charlie Kohler is an NFL tight end. Do they really like to target tight ends? Do they really want to hammer that player consistently? We have him for like 4.7 targets and 26 yards. So it's pretty close. If you want to throw that in, we can see what we get.
Sure thing. Can you repeat that one for me?
Yeah, 26.3 yards and 2.4 receptions. This is a tight one.
No, but we're seeing some edge to the under here.
The under there, yeah, depending on the book for sure, there it pops nicely. We have a good amount of usage towards them, 17% or so. So, if we trust the numbers more often than not, obviously. That's why we're here and talking about it. So I think we lean the under here too, if you wanted to go for it.
Yeah, we are definitely leaning into the under on Brahmer there for you, Rando. But meanwhile, Chris, no more questions from the chat for the moment. Of course, they know they can throw them in at any time here, and we'll hit them up. But for right now, where are we headed next here? What's next on your slate?
Well, let's look at Nebraska and look at rushing yards. And one thing I'll mention is it's only been like a week and a half, essentially, but our team is trying to compile all the numbers to see essentially success and how things have gone in the first week and a half. And we don't have anything solidified to give to you guys yet. That's something that we're working on. But one thing that we saw was, we've talked about it in previous shows. You want to really look at like 5% edges or better, just generally speaking. The volatility is insane for some of these low percentage edges.
Yeah.
We have seen a much more success, 3, 4, 5% and higher compared to 2% or less. So when you are looking at these, if you see an edge of 2%, it's not quite the same as when you look at a 2% edge in the NFL type of thing. So just keep that in mind as you guys are using the prop board.
Exactly. Yeah, you're better off looking for stuff that's a little bit higher up the board. Like that 17% is something that I like. I like that a lot. But then we get into like the 20s and 30s, and we're really feeling it. But so who are we looking for here on the rush yards?
So you don't have to input anything yet. If one of this is one of those things with college football that I don't think lines makers know as much about players. Obviously, Dylan Raiola is superstar 5-star quarterback, looked great his first game as a true freshman last week. He is not a runner. Like he ran one time, I think it was a sack last week against UTEP. They do not want him to run. He cannot run. He is way more statue than he is like DJ Lagway, who's going to start at Florida. DJ Lagway is your 5-star that's super mobile, kind of like an Anthony Richardson light. Dylan Raiola is like Jared Goff. Like a little bit more maybe mobile than Jared Goff. So I mentioned that because some of these lines like this 9.5, you see it juiced to the under, but some of these different sites have thrown up numbers on him that like last week, I think it was at 25.5, which was an insane number. So if Dylan Raiola's rush number pops up, you see a 5.5 and 9.5, like Underdog was doing longest rush of 9.5 yards, which was crazy to me. So just keep that in the back of your mind. That would certainly be an under if something like that pops up. But the reason why we can't release this game is because they're going to use 4 running backs. It's insane. The amount of usage, they all got almost the exact same amount of usage last week, and it felt pretty legit, but we don't want to mess around with it and toy with it. Let's look at which one do we? Let's do. I guess. Let's just start with Gabe Ervin and start from there. So we have him at 6.4 attempts and 31.5 yards. The pecking order of this, we believe, because it's so hard to say after 1 week. Dante Dowdle started; he looked good, but Ramir Johnson really got the most usage compared to others. And of course, I give you the guy that doesn't have a line anymore. Yep. Let's look at Ramir Johnson then. 8.9 attempts and 42.3 yards. I think with the way that they're going to use 4 guys, this game could get high scoring, could get very passive happy. I wouldn't hate some of these unders if you could find a good, like a 5% plus edge on each of these guys. And then this is one of those ones that we've talked about in the past. Keep in mind the correlation. If you're playing prize picks or underdog, don't put them together. That doesn't make sense because I'm sure one of them is going to hit the over, but just keep that in mind. Let's look at Emmett Johnson. He was used really in the middle. I would suspect he's closer to like the running back 2 or 3 for them. We have him at 8.6 attempts for 41.8 yards. Let's see what it gives us here for an edge.
Now, are you at all worried about the fact that Colorado's defense cannot stop a nosebleed?
You have to trust the numbers sometimes, Tom. That's not a great spot to be in. But we also see Shedeur Sanders, his number is insanely high, and we actually kind of like the over on the passing yards. What happens to Nebraska's run game if they're down 17-0 in the first quarter, right? Like if you're rotating in 4 guys and you're down with a bad game script, then it's not a good situation. You see a slight edge on the under here. I'd probably avoid that with Emmett Johnson. And I guess we might as well just do Dante Dowdle real quick.
Yeah, why not? We've got 3 of them down. Let's get the 4th.
8.2 and 42.5 yards. So as you can see, everybody's right around the same amount of yardage and attempts. This is the one that we do like the over on because he did start, because he did get that type of run early. You know, do we see it in a super competitive matchup that he's the one that gets the blunt of the carry? So that 4.5% edge is kind of interesting there.
Oh, right. Gabe Irvin's the one that
doesn't.
I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, come on, work. And then I realized I'm doing the wrong guy there. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's an interesting little over edge there. That's possible.
Yeah. Keep that in mind too, as the season goes on, some of these rotations, right? If you start to get kind of a hint of who that main guy is and the books are slow to pivot and make that adjustment, that this is a good spot to be in. This is the type of stuff that a site or a book's not going to catch. They'll release a Dante Dowdle line of 70 maybe because they think he's the starter and because he got run in the before the blowout, and you might be able to capitalize and knowing that it's a committee type of situation. So keep that in mind as the weeks progress.
Yeah. Wow. Jack Green says he has 6 legs left on an 11-leg parlay. All his baseball bets got in. He needs Oregon, Kansas State, Utah, Texas, SMU, and New Mexico State.
So New Mexico State's in that mix. Yeah. I'm curious, what's the line on that New Mexico State game?
Let's find out. Let's find out for him. Let's head on over and see what we can find. Let's see. I assume he's got money line bets here, but New Mexico is 21.5 point underdog here.
Maybe he's got the spread. Maybe. I mean,
the fact that he said, could they upset Liberty tells me
I'm hopeful.
He's got the money line.
He's got the money line. Yeah. I'm hoping that that payout's really juiced out. Liberty did struggle last week to start. So maybe they catch him by surprise at New Mexico State. You know, it's across the country. You never know.
Yeah, we'll be praying for you. If you can cash out, Jack says if you can cash out, I recommend taking it for I'm trying to see it here. $35 or more, take it. Jovel says just caught Murphy under 195.5 passing yards plus 134 on Prop Builder. So very nice play there if you've got any PPH accounts and are trying to grab those lines.
Yeah, Malik Murphy, Duke. Yeah, he's certainly an interesting under, and the market definitely moved that way. So yeah, if you can catch it, somebody that's a little bit slow to move, that's a good move.
Yeah. All right. Where do you want to head next here, good sir? We got about the 15-minute mark here.
Yeah, I think the final team really is Oklahoma.
Where the wind goes rushing down the plains?
I don't know what happens in Oklahoma. I've only been like once or twice, but I'm actually going to go see them play at Auburn in a couple weeks, so that'll be fun. You don't get that's one of those interesting, unique matchups you never get to see, but
yeah, that'll be fun. You're going to be seeing a lot more of it now.
Yeah, SEC is huge. Yeah. It expands the whole globe essentially at this point. Let's see here, rushing yards. Do you need the data, or did it populate and did our upload work?
No.
All right, let's look at Sawchuck. So we have Sawchuck at the split is going to be wild. 47.1 carries. Sorry,
Dak-
47.1 yards. And let's see here. The attempts is 8. This
That'd be a
one
wild
is
split
good.
of
It's going to be a
efficiency.
wild under. Let's just talk about it, right? We could never release Oklahoma because of this mix at running back. Javonte Barnes looked honestly better than Sawchuck. Sawchuck started, but never got going against Temple. The game got out of hands, and he had a horrible game. This is going to be a situation against Houston. I want to say they're 4 touchdown favorites or big favorites against him. If you watched UNLV and Houston play last week, we talked about him. Houston is like not good. They have a quarterback that is not very good at all. And I foresee a lot of short fields, a pick 6 maybe. This game could easily get out of hand. I'm not saying you should hammer a 64% edge. I'm saying just take a look at the game. If you think that this is going to be more committee than the books think, then this is an under that I would target. If you think Sawchuck is the real running back 1, I would avoid it. But I do think there's some opportunity here potentially because Javonte Barnes looked better. Quite honestly, they played multiple running backs fairly early, and they all looked better than Sawchuck, which is surprising. So we'll see how this matchup unfolds. But I do think there's potential here for the under if you think that this is going to be more committee than the books think.
All right. Yeah, very interesting. Just look at some usage rates, start checking that out. Anything else that you want to hit from this game?
Let's look at the passing. Jackson Arnold passing yards. This is going to go in line with what we kind of just mentioned with the short fields, but we have him for 245 for yardage. And let's see here, catches 19.6. So you're going to see an under here for sure on this 284.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a blowout factor here. There's also, if you, like I said, you watch that UNLV game, that offense for UNLV looked great, but those numbers didn't produce huge outputs because there were short fields. They really just sat on the ball the second half. And I think that I think Oklahoma could be doing something similar. I feel much better about this passing under than like the Preston Stone we mentioned earlier, even with that kind of being a committee or a 2 quarterback type situation. So if you want some juice on a night game on Saturday, I think Jackson Arnold under on the pass yards is definitely one to consider.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they're going to be now, it is a little bit at odds with the running back situation, but the flip side of that is that we're looking at a usage. We're looking at a usage edge for running backs versus just they're probably going to run the ball a little bit more because Houston's not that good edge when it comes to the passing yards here.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? We're not saying that everything's going to be filtered to the top running back at Oklahoma. You know, we're saying, hey, there's some murkiness with this running back room that's not properly being accounted for. Whereas with the passing game, I don't know if they've projected this this blowout appropriately. You know, great example is like Deion Burks, their top receiver. He had a huge game, looked extremely impressive. And I'll take a look at how he actually performed, but he had 3 touchdowns and maybe got 35 total yards because they just were moving it so well. He had 6 catches for 36 yards in that blowout against Temple. So that's just the type of thing that I think is certainly possible with like Arnold and with like a Sawchuck. I think both unders make sense. Wouldn't correlate them together, but I don't think you have to worry about if you were to hit both of them type of thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, Chris, I think that is going to do it for us here, unless you have another game that we want to hit before we hop out. But you were saying that's the final one. Do you have any more edges in that Oklahoma game?
No, I think that's about it. I think Burks is interesting, but he is such an impressive receiver that I'll just sit back and enjoy and watch his talent rather than get a little bit tricky with the under on him. But I think I would focus elsewhere. And I think that's the final game. We have, I want to say 18 teams and counting we're releasing here for people to look at for the Saturday games. Mm-hmm. We were able to tackle Michigan. We're able to tackle Texas. All the big games we're able to tackle. I know last week people wanted Clemson, Georgia. just didn't make sense to include Georgia just based on the murkiness of some health type stuff or suspension type stuff. But I think everybody's gonna be pretty happy with the availability and the teams being released tomorrow or for tomorrow, and hopefully we get some good run.
Yeah, and of course, if you want to get those projections and use them in the prop simulator, you got to go to unabated.com, sign up today, take advantage. One more time, we got the early bird sale going on, 18 weeks for just $650, $649 to be exact. You get everything for the NFL season. You get all of the tools from Unabated Premium. So that is not just the NFL tools, all of these college football props, all of the future simulators we have for both sports here. And of course, NBA, WNBA, hockey, literally anything that you're going to be wanting to bet on this fall, we have for you. We have tools to help you get the most EV out of your bets and boost that bankroll. So head to unabated.com/pricing. And of course, don't forget, hit subscribe and like on the YouTube channel here. We got a good audience here tonight. We appreciate you all so much for tuning in with us. Thank you so much to everyone in the chat. Jack, Jovel, Fox Mulder, Nathaniel Fucci here, Nathaniel Fucci, Dava Betts, Washmobile, Ricky Slade, CJ for days. Hey, we appreciate you all being here with us. We'll be back same time next week talking more college football. And of course, if you want to talk some NFL coming up in just a couple minutes here at the top of the hour, I'll be going live with Derek Carty and we'll be talking NFL Week 1 props as well. But for now, that is going to do it for us here today. Once again, we'll see you next week, same time, same place, and catch me in just a couple minutes with Derek Carty here talking NFL props. Chris, thank you so much for being with us. As always, you can hit Chris up in the Discord channel as well. But for right now, I'm going to go take my quick 5-minute break here, get ready for the next show, and then we'll be right back to it. The busy day continues. Football is back, baby. Best of luck, everybody, and let's cash some tickets. We'll see you next time.